there was too much to do for my sisters. There was too much to do for my nan and granddad. There was too much to do for my family, where it gave me something to do. It gave me a true purpose. It gave me a reason in the darkest days to get out of bed.
Yes, sir. Good people. Look, man, we're back for part 3, Diary of a CEO interview. Louis Tomlinson. Look, again, shout out to all my people in the comments on the channel, man. One, I appreciate the love. Two, I appreciate you guys pointing me in this direction. Y'all were all right. I had to see this one. Again, the other interview was good, and it got me rolling. But I had to see this one. It just locked me in. It just really further locked me in on exactly who this cat is, man. Hard not to wish for his continued success. We diving right back in. This is part 3. We're getting into the second hour here, and it's been a great conversation the whole time. This host is doing a fantastic job. He's doing his thing. So let's go.
Playing until they're not around, that they were almost this sort of tectonic plate underneath everything. Was that a realization at that point?
Big time. There was this true dependency on my mum that I did not realize until I'd lost my mum. So I think there was definitely stuff that I've had to learn, like being like on my own. And often she would inspire confidence. You know, I'd say, I'm worried about this. I don't want to go to this audition, or I don't want to do this, or I'm worried about this song. And she, like, you know, as she always did, made me feel like I could do anything in the planet. And she'd actually make me feel stupid for even questioning the fact that I couldn't do anything. You know, so I think there's moments like that where you've almost had to relearn confidence like that.
And
that's the sound of an American oil company hard at work.
Early commercial. They must want me to say something to y'all. So look, again, this part picks up. He's talking about he talked about the loss of his mother in the second half hour of the interview. She was his everything. His biggest cheerleader, biggest confidant, everything. He was the man in her life for pretty much the whole time. He never knew his dad. And so that was a huge loss for him. And so now, you know, I'm sure he's going to get into having to draw his confidence from somewhere else. But huge loss. And you just see what kind of makes up the fiber and the fabric of who he is, right? Just the things he's overcome, the things he's been through, but the fact that he has been able to just stay half glass full the whole time is crazy. So, you know, let's just jump back into it. See if we can get on the other side here. But they're still rolling. I continue to be impressed with how willing he is to kind of give us a look inside his head as to, you know, not only just what his struggles were, but how he was able to just deal with the things that came along the way. See if we can pick it up here. Now here we go.
At a young age.
Everyone's grief is completely individual. Something I found out more recently. Purpose was mine. Now, this is, again, not a luxury that everyone has in a situation like I found myself in. I grieved, and I had moments where I was deeply, deeply upset. But these were fleeting moments because there was too much to do for my sisters. There was too much to do for my nan and granddad. There was too much to do for my family, where it gave me something to do. It gave me a true purpose. It gave me a reason in the darkest days to get out of bed and confidently get out of bed. Because there was stuff that needed to be done. And at that time, my sisters were so young. And I was so terrified of what kind of effect that would have on them, you know, growing up. And luckily, they impress me every day. They're amazing, amazing women. My role felt like the strong one in that situation, and someone who's willing to give someone, you know, Daisy would call me and she'd be really upset. And by the end of the call, she can just see the glimpse of a glass half full. That was my job, you know. The grief became less relevant because of the need to look after everyone else. Like sometimes might get asked, like, what advice would you give to people with grief? It's just an impossible question to answer, just because, like, I'm still feeling it. Like you could, and the interesting thing about that is you could spend 2 weeks with me and you never knew me and you never knew my life story. Never in a million years would you think. So I don't carry myself like that. I'm not someone who's like down in the dumps like that. But it's still there. It will never go away.
What are the symptoms of it still being there?
There is like this air of unpredictable. This feeling of, and that's sometimes where my positivity comes from too. Like, things could change tomorrow. So I suppose that is, and that kind of jeopardy and that kind of idea, that's how I would interpret it. That, and because for any grief that I've experienced, it has been relatively quick. I haven't really had a lot of time to compute these kind of ideas.
Does that create a certain anxiety with life and a certain worry for life that, if the family...
That's a great question that he's getting into. I'm gonna jump back into it, but I will say this: two things that Louis just said right there. One, when you're the person in the family that he was, you almost don't have time to just. You either have to create it, and even when you try to create the time to actually grieve, you don't. What happens? You realize that the things that you have to be responsible for fill up that space, and that's what allows you to get through it in a certain sense. And that kind of grief doesn't ever go completely away, but it makes you aware that it's there and that it happens, and that it can happen at any moment. And so you live your life a little bit differently. You know that the unexpected can happen, so it makes you enjoy the small things more. It makes you enjoy today more. It makes you have to be more present, because you have to deal with the absolute fact that things aren't forever. No doubt about it. Here we go.
Situations are uncertain and bad news can arrive at any moment. One would, that seems like the breeding ground of worry and anxiety. I actually wrote that down earlier because when we were speaking earlier, you said, I wasn't a worrier back then. When you're talking about your childhood.
Yeah, I didn't used to be a worrier. Now, I'm sure most people can say that, right? Your worry levels, or at least for most people, you have less worry when you're younger, You haven't quite understood all your emotions yet, really.
Do you have anxiety? Do you struggle with it?
Or responsibility?
It's like, I experience it all the time. Is it something that kind of controls me? No. I'm sure you've heard about this. My vocal coach always used to say to me that the feeling of being anxious and excited are near identical in feeling. And that was something that always kind of stuck with me, really, because not always, but like a lot of like stuff that feels really good can be quite intimidating beforehand, that it was an anxiety that comes with doing something that is out of the ordinary, I suppose. I can distinctly remember, not so much now, but on the first tour, like I would literally, before going out on stage, I'd literally, as futile and as ridiculous as it is, I'd think to myself, like, how do I run away from this? Like, how could I literally run out the door and not do the gig? So maybe that would be a version of anxiety. But it didn't stop me getting up there and doing it, I suppose. Maybe there's the difference.
A couple of years after the passing of your mother, you lose your younger sister, Felicity. And the circumstances of her death are deeply, deeply tragic. When I was speaking to several people in your life around you, they talked about how you had done so much since the passing of your mother to support your sisters, how you'd really taken on the role as being the quote-unquote head of the family, is what they told me. And the tragedy is deepened by the fact that she's 18 years old at the time. Again, an unthinkable tragedy for one person to go through in their life, but for you to go through two of these things in succession is... I don't have the words. Yeah, that was kind of what I was speaking about before, that moment of stubbing your toe and that kind of aggravating you. That was just like that idea accentuated. I just couldn't believe, I couldn't believe how deeply unlucky we've been as a family. It was just, now, maybe it's not overly uncommon. People that you lose parents young and obviously struggle to deal with a bit at the time. I felt angry at life, and I felt angry mostly on behalf of my family. Now, it wouldn't be
Like obviously I would know that I was included in this idea, but I wouldn't be thinking, what have I done to deserve this? It was more, Daisy and Phoebe are so young. They've already had and Lottie as well, already had so much to deal with. Why this and why now? It did feel incredibly, incredibly unfair. That's something that's interesting about grief, is just how different each thing feels. Because that definitely, it hit me in a different way. I mean, it was completely sudden and immediate. Again, one of the most challenging moments of my life. So I'm sat in my house in London, and everything was like fine. I was a little bit worried. I've been worried about Felicity for the months prior, as I was worried about all my sisters, and I was just sat in my front room, smoking a joint, not thinking about anything really. And then the doorbell rang at like 1 in the morning or something, or maybe like midnight. And I had this feeling come over me straight away. And I'm not really this kind of guy where on another day, I might have been worried that the police were coming to grab me weed, but it wasn't like that. I just had this thing come over me straight away, and I knew it was bad. I knew that, look, when someone rings your doorbell at that time, it's rarely good news. And then I opened the gates. I've got these gates, and I opened the gates, and I saw the police car and the policeman. And then they told me that she passed away, and I literally was like, okay. Right. I can't tell you why, because it was just
Shot.
It was only me and my best friend and my ex-girlfriend at the time. So it wasn't like a pride thing of me being like, okay, like I'm cool, I'm fine. Not only was I in denial at that moment, like I just refused to even compute it. It was just like, okay, cool. And then I remember shutting the door. And then I told the people I'm in the house with, and obviously then they start crying, and obviously then I think your brain starts catching up with you.
Man.
And something that was really, really tough for me at this moment in time, and this is a stupid thing to say because I know that he was more than willing to be there for me, but my best friend who I was living at the time, who's here today, I remember him saying, I'm just so sorry. And he was crying his eyes out. I was just like, I'm just so sorry. I'm so sorry. And I felt guilty that he felt like that. It's just stupid. But, and so I'd said before about how this is, me and my family are some of the characters in this story, but often what's not spoke about in the name of grief is people like my best friend and the role that they have to play. Now, these are not trained therapists. These are not people who've had any kind of reference of this kind of pain. And all you're doing as a best friend there is actually demanding, or just praying, hoping that they give you something in return that will not change the reality, but just, be there for you or whatever. And that... Nothing prepares you in life for those kind of situations. That's something that I will forever, forever, ever be in debt to him for. Because, yes, this is an unfathomable, it's a really impossible situation for me and my family to have found ourselves in. But there are other people at play too, and I can only imagine how hard that was. And he knew how hard it was for me, and how I just lost my mum, and there are no words, right? I'm sure you're just scrambling your brain trying to find the words, and there isn't any.
Definitely no words.
Also, bear in mind everything that I've said before this. If I was to dumb my role down to like one thing in life, I'd maybe say like to look after people. Or like in the context of my sisters, the protector, right? To lose my sister in the manner that we did, even though I knew that it wasn't fair on myself, like I felt utterly guilty. I felt powerless, and I felt like I'd let my sister and like I'd let my mum down, really. My mum said to me, in like the last couple of weeks of her life, she was like, you better promise me you look after your sisters. And I'm like, yeah, of course, I will. And she was like, but specifically Felicity, she's fragile. I felt like I'd failed her at the time. That's the truth. I know now that I didn't, and if she was here now, she would say that you didn't. But yeah, it doesn't change the feeling, and that's again, that's always been the role I played in the family. So, and all I was trying to do after my mum was just put me and my sisters and my grandparents in a bubble, and just like nothing's gonna get to us, So that it sounds like a really arrogant thing to say. I mean this more metaphorically, but it truly undermined me. It undermined all the hope that I'd had, all these kind of ideas that I was instilling post a life without our mum. It just kind of undermined all those ideas. It made it a lot more challenging for me to say them and feel them and believe them. But it's the same with my sisters, So it just made everything, obviously, infinitely more difficult. The only thing I'm thankful is that my mum wasn't around to see that, because that would have been horrible for her. But
I actually learnt this from being around Liam. When someone is struggling with their own demons per se, unless you've been around someone who's really struggling, you probably don't understand how helpless it often feels. And in hindsight, it's, someone that's not been in those situations thinks, well, you just go over there and you sit with them and have dinner and then you fix it, you just stay. But actually the reality of helping someone who's struggling is they often do things in private and in secretly. You referenced, you knew that Felicity was struggling with something. Was that the passing of your mother that she was struggling with, or was it life generally?
I think it was a bit of both. I think obviously mum passing definitely amplified any of those things. But I think with Felicity, she was one of these people that she was uber intelligent from a young age. Really, really, really intelligent, which is ironic, because I'd say we're a relatively smart family, but she was in her own league. Really, really intelligent woman. And I think that brought its own social frustration for her. Definitely, you hear these people that are intelligent from a young age. She would always have felt like she was on the outside looking in, but only because of her intellect, really. And that's tough for kids when they're younger. Definitely, it's not something I can personally relate to, but I can imagine how that would be really alienating and tough. Felicity was probably the most like my mum. So that also carried its own weight, because it felt, I'd say Felicity looked the most like my mum as well, visually.
I mean, she's
yeah, it's crazy.
You all look like each other, to be honest.
Yeah, we do. I used to get that when I was younger. People always used to say how much I look like my mum, and as a young lad, that's not really what you want to hear. But I'm really proud that. Yeah. Yeah, you can see how much I love her there. Bless.
They do look a lot alike. Indeed.
Then what about the moment when you...
Tough. Past tough. To have to deal with that kind of loss back to back. With your mom, you say, okay, well, there's no competing with cancer. With the sister, when you've been given the role of being the protector and the provider, and you are that in tune with that role as in tune as he is, obviously, man, that's tough. I mean, it just makes it's like you say, at some point, how do you, it's just like pouring gasoline on the fire. It really, really is. Because now you feel like you broke a promise to mom and you weren't there. Just the struggle to not make yourself responsible is crazy.
I've alluded to some of this stuff in the past, not really ever spoke about it in depth like this. And part of the reason for that is, and this is the correct forum and it makes sense, but part of the reason for that is I can't think of anything worse than being, what's the word? If someone like this was talking to me about this and I had not experienced that, I'd feel really sorry for them, naturally. I don't like that. I don't like those feelings. I don't like those ideas. I appreciate that it's weighty and people should, of course, feel sorry. But I think the reason that I'm always quite selective of when I talk about it is because I cannot have that define me. I can't. It's not fair to my family. It's not fair to Felicity. It's not fair to my mum. Like, I can't. And, you know, the problem is if we walked out of here and we just happened to get papped, right? In the article, the Daily Mail print, every single time they will write about this stuff, you know, like every single time. It could be me and you going to get a coffee and then, you know, they do that thing where it's like a 20% new article and then they just fluff out the rest of the 80% with basically the narrative that they want to push. But that's something that I can't escape, and I find that really frustrating because I'm not someone who is a glass half empty kind of guy. I don't want those kind of feelings and emotions. I empathize and understand with anyone hearing these stories. Of course, maybe you would feel bad for me. But I think my biggest worry in these kind of things, and an example of that would be when I released a song called Two of Us, which was a song that was written essentially about my mum's passing.
Yeah.
And I didn't realize by releasing that song how, A, it would open the floodgates to have many people kind of, you know, put a lot of their trauma on me as well, which is okay, but also creating this thing where anyone just feels like they could ask anything then. So I remember going on to BBC Breakfast News, and it's one of those things, it's fucking early morning slot. Like, not even the presenters want to be there, never mind me at that time. I'm not good with early mornings. Anyway, so I'm going on to talk about Two of Us, the single. Now, we distinctly said, you know what it's like, you know, these are the things that are okay to mention, and do not mention these things. Now, if I was going to go on and talk about what the song was about, then fair enough, you know, that's one thing. But I actually had a journalist at the time who asked me directly about those things, and I'd known that we'd said don't. Now, it's very different to be, like, sometimes on that list we might have don't speak about One Direction. Like, that this is not what I've got a problem with. But when someone's had their own grief and you're still then going to ask those kind of questions, I think I find that really, really troubling. And I think what was interesting was I left the interview, and I used to be good at this when I was a bit younger, and I obviously took to Twitter and was like, never fucking working with the BBC again, blah, 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 blah. And then he came back at me, this journalist. He said, well, if you write a song about grief, expect to be asked about it. And my instinctive reaction was, there's somebody who hasn't experienced grief. They couldn't possibly have. Because if they had, they wouldn't make such a horrible, horrible comment that just lacked all kind of empathy. So I think it's those kind of moments where I'm quite guarded with this kind of information, just because I think a lot of people, if I never spoke about it, I don't carry myself as someone that looks like they're really hurting. At least I hope I don't. I don't think I do.
Do you know what it sounds like a crazy thing for me to say, but I had no idea.
Okay, right, yeah, okay, yeah.
So we met at Soccer Aid.
Okay, right.
I had no
I like
idea.
that. Okay, that makes me feel good, actually.
And, you know, it's just me being honest. I had no idea. I'm not someone that, I don't really read newspapers. I don't stay close to tabloid stuff. I had known Liam, but Liam hadn't spoken to me about these things. I'd met you, we'd hang out for a couple of days at Soccer Aid. I had no idea.
Yeah, okay.
And it was only in researching your story and your background and understanding where you've come from and really what inspires a lot of the music and different things like that I started to understand these things. So you're certainly not someone that carries yourself in with any particular identity. Really, that one could discern, other than just being a normal guy. And the other thing that connects us it was Liam. And I think it would have been Liam's birthday a couple of days ago.
Yeah.
His birthday was 3 days off mine, so his 29th of August, I believe, and mine's the 26th. And we both, I knew him a little bit, you knew him an awful.
Before he gets into Liam, I think this is a boy. This one is tough. This is somebody's really being willing to talk about their biggest traumatic experiences. Like I'm just blown away. Like like he must. Louis obviously has a huge amount of trust in this particular host. Big man, they must have a real relationship because this is crazy. And I don't know if he had this conversation with a lot of other people. He didn't in the other interview. He didn't get this specific. But man, this is super heartfelt. And now they're parlaying that into speaking of Liam, which is crazy. I'm gonna pause here. I'm gonna finish with that. I'm gonna let him pick up here, and finish with that. But just man, pouring his soul out here, and it's wild. Like for him to still be a half glass full person after going through this. You can only do that with a huge support group and a lot of God in your life, and just being a blessed spirit. Somebody that's who you are for real. So we're gonna break away right here, and we're gonna come back and we're gonna finish up. But just super powerful, extremely powerful interview on all fronts, man. Look, y'all know who it is. Look, I'll be right back at y'all. Look, holla at your boy.